Would you believe that a dog managed to prevent a child from being taken by a stranger on the street? It looks like a movie scene, but this story really happened in the United States, and to this day chills anyone who hears the details. Imagine for a moment a seemingly quiet street, an ordinary day, nothing to arouse suspicion, until suddenly a stranger approaches an innocent child, trying to take her without anyone noticing. Danger was there, lurking, silent, ready to turn an ordinary routine into a nightmare. But what this man did not expect was that between him and his goal, there was a four-legged guardian, ready to act with an almost supernatural instinct. Have you ever thought about the power that animals have to realize what we humans often ignore? What you will discover now may surprise you, because in a matter of seconds, the dog of that family did something that completely changed the course of this story. He realized the risk before any adult, even before the child himself understood what was happening. And that is where the beauty of this narrative lies, the instinct, loyalty, and pure courage of an animal that did not hesitate to put itself in the face of danger to protect the one it loved. It is not today that we hear reports of dogs capable of saving lives, whether in drowning situations, domestic accidents, or even in natural disasters. But when we talk about a kidnapping about to happen, the tension rises to another level. We are talking about seconds that could define a tragic fate, seconds when the unexpected hero was not an armed adult, nor the police who arrived on time, but rather a dog that refused to let evil win. Stay with me until the end, because you will feel the strength of this protective instinct that seems to surpass any limit. Imagine the scene in more detail. A child walking distractedly, perhaps returning from a quick walk or playing near the house, while the adults around believed that everything was under control. Suddenly, this man appears with intentions that no one could have foreseen. My heart skips a beat just thinking about it. How many times have we not heard stories of hidden dangers in everyday life, situations in which evil disguises itself as normality? And it is precisely at this moment that the unlikely hero appears, an attentive, suspicious dog, which in seconds turns barking into alertness and courage into action. Have you ever been through this? Have you ever experienced the feeling that something was wrong and that you needed to react immediately without time to think? That's exactly the reaction the dog had. Without measuring consequences, without waiting for help from anyone, he took the lead. This is the essence of animal heroism, to act on instinct, moved by a love that needs no explanation. And that is also the reason why this story has gone viral, touching so many people who believe that dogs carry within them a courage capable of inspiring any human being. But before you know the exact moment when this dog pounced on the stranger and completely changed the outcome of that afternoon, it is important to feel the atmosphere of this story. We are faced with a scenario in which the danger seemed invisible, in which no one imagined what was about to happen, and it is precisely in this apparent calm that the suspense grows even more. After all, what would happen if the dog wasn't there? What would have become of the child? These questions make us realize how the presence of an animal can be determinant in our lives, far beyond the company or daily affection. And it is in this climate of tension and expectation that we move forward, following step by step how this dog became a true hero, defying the unexpected and preventing the worst from happening. And maybe that's why stories like this move us so much. Because they speak not only of a brave dog, but also of something much deeper, the sense of security, affection, and loyalty that these animals awaken in our lives. It's impossible to hear something like this and not remember some time when you also felt the protective instinct of an animal, or that silent call that seems to say, "I'm here for you." If this topic makes sense to you, leave here in the comments what has touched you the most so far, or even a similar experience that you have already lived with your dog. I will love knowing how these stories connect with your reality, and as we're on this journey together to explore animal heroism, your support is critical to getting that message across. When you like this video, YouTube understands that it has value and shows it to more people who also need to know inspiring stories like this. And when you subscribe to the channel, in addition to strengthening this community that grows every day, you guarantee that you will not miss any of the next exciting stories that come out. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content, creating a current of inspiration and affection that only increases. And now that you've gotten into this mood, Get ready because the most intense part of this story is yet to come. The child was a girl of only 7 years old, the owner of a shy smile and endless curiosity about the world around her. Every day when she returned from school, she carried her small, colorful backpack and crossed the street towards the house where her best friend was already waiting for her anxiously. This friend was not a classmate or a neighbor of the same age, but a medium-sized dog with a brown coat and eyes that conveyed something difficult to describe, as if they kept a hidden truth that only those who live closely together realize. He needed no words to express his devotion. It was enough just to wag your tail, run in circles of pure joy and lie at her feet as if to say, "You are never alone." His name was Max, and to that child, Max wasn't just a pet. He was part of the family, a companion on adventures, a silent confidant of the day's discoveries. On afternoons of playing in the yard, it was he who ran after the ball, even when it got tired. At night, when the silence of the house seemed too great, it was Max who lay beside her bed, breathing in a measured way, as if lending his calmness to lull her to sleep. It was in this everyday coexistence, so simple and at the same time so powerful, that a bond was formed that often even adults cannot understand. Anyone who has lived this experience knows there is something transformative in the relationship between a child and a dog. It is not just about companionship, but full trust, a mindset that shapes the way the child sees the world. Max was that kind of dog who seemed to guess feelings. If the girl came home sad, he did not need her to explain anything. He approached her slowly, leaned his head on her lap, and stood there, quiet, until the tears turned into shy laughter. This ability to perceive emotions and act so genuinely is a revelation that makes us question how far the sensitivity of animals goes. It was common to see the two walking together along the narrow sidewalk of the neighborhood, as if sharing a secret routine that only they understood. While the girl waved her feet absently or stopped to observe a butterfly perched on a flower, Max remained attentive, looking to the side, sniffing the air, as if he were always in charge of an invisible mission. He was a silent, discreet guardian, but absolutely present. The impact of this on the life of a child is immense, because he grows up with the certainty that he is not alone, that he can fully trust someone who will never leave him in his hand. And it is precisely in this seemingly ordinary routine that the impact of this whole story lives. Because when we speak of heroes, we immediately think of great deeds, of grandiose acts that mark the collective memory. But Max's heroism was already manifested behind the scenes, in the small daily attitudes that often went unnoticed. He did not have to wait for a moment of danger to show his courage. Every gesture of silent protection already revealed the depth of his loyalty. It was as if, with every watchful eye, he was training for the day when he would need to make a real and risky decision. This connection between the two went beyond the surface. For the girl, Max was synonymous with freedom. It was he who accompanied her on small explorations around the neighborhood, on summer afternoons, when they both ran aimlessly, just enjoying the feeling of the wind on their faces and the grass under their feet. Next to him, she felt that she could be who she really was, without masks or fears. And for Max, that bond was more than a routine. It was his mission, his life purpose. To protect, to be present, to offer companionship, it was all part of his journey. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because when we look closely at the relationship between a child and a dog, we realize that there is silent learning going on all the time. The child discovers the value of loyalty, the importance of patience, the feeling of having someone who never judges him. The dog, on the other hand, finds in the child the purity of an affection without conditions, a love that does not charge, does not demand, only exists. This exchange is so intense that it shapes behaviors, influences decisions, and even strengthens the child's mindset in the face of life's challenges. If we stop to reflect, we will see that many of our own transformations begin in simple moments like these, small experiences that leave deep marks. A dog that teaches you to wait, that shows you how presence can be more powerful than any words. A child who learns at such an early age that trust is built on gestures, not promises. This dynamic creates a solid emotional foundation, capable of influencing an entire journey of growth. And when we look at this story carefully, we realize that it brings important revelations for adults as well. Because in the midst of the chaos of everyday life, we often fail to value the behind the scenes of life, those seemingly small moments that have a gigantic impact. The simple fact of arriving home and being greeted with enthusiasm, the watchful eye of someone who notices your sadness before you even admit it. These are details that, if observed with the right mindset, reveal a deeper sense of coexistence and true love. It's curious to think how stories like this reveal aspects of our own humanity. Because deep down, when we connect with these bonds, we realize that we seek the same thing: security, affection, recognition. The difference is that animals deliver it in a pure form, without ulterior motives. This hidden truth, often ignored in the rush of everyday life, becomes evident when we see the naturalness with which a child trusts his dog. And it is in this confidence that the force lives that would completely change the fate of that afternoon when danger appeared unexpectedly. Before this moment comes, it is important to feel the weight of this bond, because it explains everything that happened afterwards. Without this invisible link, perhaps Max would not have reacted in the same way. Maybe I would have hesitated. Maybe I would have backed off. But that's not what happened. His instinct was not born of chance, but of daily coexistence, of the infinite hours in which he placed himself as a guardian, even if no one had explicitly asked him to do so. This story is about courage, yes, but also about unconditional love and the silent impact that small gestures can generate. It's about how the choices we make, even the simplest ones, can set the stage for destiny-changing revelations. It is about the transformation that is born in everyday affection, without an audience, without applause, because it is there, in the silence of ordinary days, that true heroes are formed. And if this part of the story touched you in any way, comment there. This makes sense to me. On that particular day, the sun was still shining high in the sky, spreading a golden light that made the afternoon ordinary and seemingly quiet. The street, where movement was usually discreet, seemed safe to anyone watching from the outside. Children played in the distance, neighbors tended their gardens, and the girl walked carefree, as she always did, with her small backpack swinging on her back, and Max, faithful as usual, following her steps. Everything seemed within the norm, within that routine that never gave reason for distrust. However, it is precisely at moments like this, when the sense of security is greater, that the unexpected hides behind the scenes of life, ready to reveal itself in an impactful way. Across the street, a man walked with calculated steps. His presence did not attract attention at first glance. There were no sudden gestures or obvious expressions of threat. It could be just another passerby, someone who was passing by like so many others. But there was something subtle in his gaze, a quiet fixation that was unnatural. His eyes did not casually explore the street. They were fixed on the girl, following every step she took, as if he had chosen her in the midst of so many possibilities. This detail, imperceptible to the surrounding adults, was immediately picked up by Max, who slowed down, raised his ears, and began to observe every movement of the stranger. The curious thing is that the child, in his innocence, did not notice anything wrong. For her, the world was still a place of discovery, and the idea that someone could approach with bad intentions was not part of her mentality. Trust was natural, almost automatic, and this purity made it vulnerable to those who carried hidden intentions. The man then began to shorten the distance, his steps becoming more and more in sync with hers. It was like following a rehearsed choreography, but deep down it was a dark decision about to be executed. The tension grew invisibly. The danger was there, but no one around seemed to notice. The neighbors were still busy, laughter in the distance drowned out any suspicion, and the child himself was still distracted. This contrast between apparent normalcy and imminent threat is what lends weight to this story. How many times in our own journeys have we come across situations where danger was on our side without us realizing it? This is the hidden truth that we often prefer not to face. The biggest risks are not always presented clearly. The man approached even closer, slowing down as if looking for the exact moment to act. He carried in his posture a mixture of apparent calm and disturbing intentions. It was possible to notice in his gestures a restrained anxiety, as if each step was part of a plan that needed to be executed without fail. The child, oblivious to everything, stopped for an instant to adjust the strap of the backpack, and it was in this detail that he saw the perfect opportunity. The space between them was no longer so large. It would only take a few seconds, maybe just a quick decision, for that day to turn into something completely different. Max, however, did not avert his eyes. His instincts were already on alert. and his quickened breathing betrayed that something was wrong. It was as if, deep down, he knew he was facing a revelation that would change his routine forever. The dog didn't just see a man walking down the street. He felt the energy of someone who didn't belong in that scenario. This is the impact we often overlook. Animal sensitivity goes beyond appearance, beyond what human eyes can grasp. Meanwhile, the atmosphere around seemed to conspire so that no one else would notice what was about to happen. The sound of cars in the distance, the singing of birds, even the gentle wind that swayed the trees, created an illusion of tranquility. This combination deceived the senses of adults, but it could not deceive Max. The child, in turn, still walked lightly, swaying his feet and humming something softly, completely surrendered to the moment. The man, getting closer and closer, slightly extended his hand as if just to get her attention, but in his mind the decision was already made. There was no more room for hesitation. His eyes betrayed a clear goal, a dark desire to take that innocence with him. It was at this point that time seemed to slow down, as if every fraction of a second had a disproportionate weight. And it was just at that moment that Max stepped forward, subtly but firmly positioning himself between the girl and the stranger. This detail, almost invisible, marked the beginning of the confrontation. The dog had not yet attacked, but his posture made it evident that something was not right. The tail stopped wagging, the ears remained raised, and the fixed gaze conveyed a silent message. I know what you intend, and I will not allow it. It was an instinctive decision, but one loaded with meaning. Max did not wait for someone to tell him what to do, did not ask permission to act. He simply placed himself as a barrier, revealing that sometimes the most powerful protection is born from silent loyalty. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because what is revealed in this instant is not only the beginning of a physical danger, but also the representation of how many situations in our lives sneak up on us. We don't always notice when something threatens our journey, our choices, our mindset. Often the signs are there, but covered up by a false sense of normalcy. It is in this contrast that we understand the true value of instinct, intuition, and the presence of one who sees beyond the surface. The emotional impact of this moment is immense, not only for the scene itself, but because it reminds us that evil rarely presents itself with a warning sign. It comes disguised, hidden behind ordinary gestures, masked by the appearance of normalcy. The man on that street didn't scream danger in the eyes of anyone passing by. But for Max, who lived behind the scenes of that child's life, every detail exposed a threat that needed to be contained. The suspense intensified with every second, and although no one else noticed, a silent battle had already begun. The child was still unaware, but the dog and the man were in a kind of invisible duel, in which only a gesture would be enough to transform the course of that afternoon. This is the kind of revelation that only makes sense when we look in retrospect. The danger was there in front of everyone, but only an attentive heart was able to recognize it in time. And if so far you have felt the tension growing, write there in the comments, I'm on this journey too. Max remained motionless for a few seconds, but inside him, something was already seething. His instincts, trained not by human commands, but by the daily coexistence of love and protection, went off like a silent alert. While the girl continued to be distracted, humming softly and fiddling with the strap of the backpack, Max did not take his eyes off the man. The air felt heavy, as if the atmosphere around had suddenly changed, bringing out a tension that no one else could feel. It was at this moment that the dog, in an almost imperceptible gesture, advanced half a step forward, positioning itself closer to the child, like an invisible barrier between him and the approaching stranger. What differentiates an ordinary dog from a true protector is this anticipated perception, this reading of the environment that goes beyond what human eyes are capable of capturing. Max sniffed, noted the restrained gestures, and noticed the man's fixed gaze. Every detail served as a piece of a puzzle that only he seemed to be able to put together. It was not merely a question of distrust. There was a certainty born of a primitive instinct, a hidden truth that said clearly something is wrong. And when this instinct awakens, there is no hesitation. At first, Max let out a low growl, almost muffled but enough to break the apparent tranquility. The child turned to him in surprise, not immediately understanding the reason for the sudden change in behavior. After all, that wasn't the Max she knew from light banter. This was guardian Max, awake, transformed by the perception of danger. The man, perceiving the growl, hesitated for an instant, as if he had been exposed, as if his intention had been plucked from behind the scenes of the mind and brought to light. But the dog did not stop there. Within seconds, the growls gave way to loud, incisive barking that echoed down the street and caught the attention of those nearby. It was as if each bark carried a warning: "I know what you intend and I will not let it happen." This sound impact, unexpected, made the atmosphere completely change. What was once silence and routine was now alertness and urgency. The girl, confused, grabbed the strap of the backpack more tightly and cowered next to the dog, instinctively seeking in him the security that she always found. Max advanced a few steps towards the man, his body bent, his ears erect and his gaze fixed, conveying the determination of one who would not retreat. The man tried to disguise, raised his hands as if he had nothing to hide, but his posture revealed tension. His feet moved restlessly, like someone assessing whether to continue with the plan or retreat in the face of the unexpected threat. Max had no room for doubt. With each movement of the stranger, his barking intensified, his body protruded even further forward, ready to act. This is the moment we realize how powerful animal intuition can be, because the adults around had not yet fully understood what was happening. Maybe they just saw an agitated dog. Maybe they thought it was reacting to some stranger. But there was something deeper at stake. Max had already made a decision. He wasn't just reacting, he was taking on the role of absolute guardian, willing to risk everything to protect the girl. This posture was not rehearsed. It was not the fruit of military training or strict commands. It was the result of a silent journey, built on every hug, on every night of sleep next to the child, on every look of trust. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because what is happening here is not just a scene of animal defense, but a lesson in mentality and about how certain decisions are made instinctively, without time for rational calculations. Often in life, we do not have room to draw up complex plans. Danger arises suddenly, and it is the sum of all that we have lived up to that time that determines the reaction. Max did not think about whether it was worth it, did not analyze the risk. He simply acted, revealing the impact of the invisible connection that already existed between him and the child. This scene also invites us to reflect on how, deep down, we all carry this same protective instinct. In some situations of our journey, we are called to act immediately, even without guarantees, and it is in that instant that who we really are is revealed. The dog, realizing the danger, showed that his choices were already set long before that moment. He did not wait for the girl to ask for help, did not wait for adults to understand. He took responsibility for himself, as who knows that there are decisions that simply cannot be postponed. The barking continued to echo, and now the street no longer seemed the same. The sound that used to be of children's laughter and birds in the late afternoon was replaced by a constant alert, by a tension that grew by the second. Some neighbors started looking out their windows. Others stopped what they were doing to try to understand the scene. But the real clash was still only at the beginning. On one side, the man, exposed in his intention. On the other, Max, firm, determined, ready to go beyond the limits to ensure the safety of the child. This sudden transformation from an ordinary afternoon to an imminent risk scenario shows how life can change in a matter of seconds. A moment of carelessness can make room for the unexpected, but a moment of courage can completely reverse the course of history. And that was what began to be drawn at that moment, before eyes still inattentive, but with a protagonist who would never allow the threat to materialize. The impact of this perception is something that makes us think not only about animals, but also about ourselves. How often do we ignore clear signals in our own lives because we are distracted by the routine, by the constant noise around? Max didn't ignore it. He read the environment, trusted his intuition, and put himself on the front line. This is the most powerful revelation of this scene. Courage is born from sensitivity, from the ability to notice what is hidden, from attention to detail that others would rather not see. While the man hesitated, the dog advanced another step, as one who reduces any space for a contrary decision. The silent duel became more and more evident, and the girl, now clinging to Max, felt that something serious was happening, even if she did not understand exactly what. This sense of danger began to invade his innocent mind as well, bringing out a new awareness that the world is not always as safe as it seemed. And it is at this moment at this very point in the narrative that fate begins to shape itself irreversibly. The man was faced with an obstacle he had not foreseen. The dog, in turn, had no way back. He had taken on the role of guardian and would not let go of this position so easily. And if so far this scene has moved you in any way, comment there. This makes sense to me. The instant when everything changed was so fast that it seemed impossible to follow with the eyes. The man's hand advanced towards the child in a gesture that, at first glance, could be mistaken for something harmless, but that carried the shadow of a dangerous intention. And it was in that very second that Max transformed. There was no room for doubt. There was no gap between perception and reaction. With a sudden, almost explosive jump, the dog lunged at the intruder, tightly grabbing the sleeve of his coat. The shock was so intense that it tore off the disguise of the moment, exposing to everyone's eyes what had hitherto remained hidden behind the scenes. This was not just a casual approach, it was a real attempt to take the girl. The noise echoed down the street. The sound of angry barking mixed with the muffled screams of the man broke the silence of the afternoon like a siren. The scene, which a second earlier was routine, was now fraught with tension. The girl instinctively retreated, her eyes wide, watching her best friend become, before her, more than a playmate. It was a living shield. The emotional impact of that moment cannot be measured in simple words because it represented the meeting of two extremes: innocence and menace, courage and malice. The man reacted violently, trying to shake his arm to free himself, but Max wouldn't let go. Every movement of the stranger was answered more firmly, more forcefully, with more conviction. It wasn't just a bite, it was a statement. He was imprinting on the offender's body the non-negotiable message that the child would not be touched. The dog's muscles vibrated with tension, but its energy came from something other than physical strength. It was the guardian mentality that moved him, the instinct of one who understands that there is no choice between fighting or retreating. This is the kind of decision that does not fit into human logic, because Max did not think about himself. He did not calculate risks, did not worry about pain, did not stop to imagine what could happen to him. The hidden truth behind her action was much simpler and at the same time much more powerful. The girl's life was untouchable. This quiet certainty turned a pet into an absolute hero. The child's heart beat fast, each breath seemed too short to account for the tension. For the first time, she felt the weight of danger on her skin, but she also discovered the strength of unconditional protection. The thread of hope that held her steady had a name, had watchful eyes, and teeth set in the enemy's sleeve. The transformation of the scene was brutal, from a leisurely walk to a moment of life and death in a matter of seconds. Neighbors, now attracted by the incessant barking, began to leave their homes confused and frightened. But before anyone could act, the scene was already underway, commanded by Max's courage. The stranger writhed, looked for a way out, but each attempt to retreat was thwarted by the dog's persistence, which resisted with a force disproportionate to its size. Now I want to go even deeper into this matter, because what we are witnessing here is not just a physical confrontation. It is a lesson about decisions, about the essence of purpose, and about how, in the most critical moments, the truth of our character reveals itself. Max didn't need time to choose. His whole journey at the girl's side had prepared him for this. Evenings of company, days of play, moments of quiet attention. Each instant had shaped in him a guardian mentality, ready to explode into action when the situation demanded it. This is the impact of courage, when a being places himself between evil and good, between threat and innocence, without asking for anything in return. Max did not know legal rules, did not understand the concept of crime, but he understood in its purity the most important notion of all: to protect the life entrusted to him. This instinctive conviction is the same that guides people in extreme moments, when they have to act without thinking, moved only by a non-negotiable love. The man, already faltering, was trying to break free with desperate movements. His body trembled, the expression of control was gone, and his arm ached under the pressure of the dog's jaw. But the more he fought, the clearer the difference between them became. The man's brute strength wasn't enough to overcome Max's determination, because what sustained the dog wasn't just muscle, it was purpose. This revelation is powerful. The strongest is not always the one who has the physical advantage, but the one who finds in his heart a greater reason to resist. Meanwhile, the girl cried silently, not only from fear, but also from relief. The tears streaming down her face carried an early realization: Max would never leave her. It was the revelation of a love that is not expressed in words, but in gestures, in choices, in decisions that change destinies. This is the transformation that moments of crisis bring to the surface, the realization that there is an invisible link capable of defying even the most threatening darkness. The street, now filled with noise, became the scene of a clash of opposing worlds. On the one hand, evil in disguise, which hides under seemingly ordinary gestures. On the other, absolute loyalty, which does not need masks or justifications. The confrontation, although physical, was also symbolic. It represented the eternal battle between hidden intentions and unconditional protection. Every second, the man lost more space. His arm ached, his body faltered, and his breathing betrayed despair. Max, on the other hand, stood firm, his eyes shining with determination. He didn't need reinforcement. He didn't need applause. His decision was already made. For him, there was no turning back. This kind of scene reminds us of something profound about our own journey. How many times in our lives are we faced with situations that require immediate intervention? How many times do we ignore signals because we rely too much on routine, on the illusion of security? Max didn't ignore it. He understood, acted, intervened, and in doing so, he left an eternal lesson about instinct, love, and purpose. The neighbors were already murmuring, some trying to get closer, others still paralyzed by surprise, but no one could ignore what was in front of their eyes. They weren't just watching a dog fight a man, they were witnessing the birth of a story that would be remembered. The girl, sheltered behind Max, felt fear, but at the same time discovered a new meaning for the word trust. The fight seemed to have no end, but one truth was already clear: that man would not be able to take the child. The guardian had placed himself before him and would not retreat. The whole street already understood this, and the tension, although intense, also carried a feeling that the victory of courage was near. And if this moment has awakened something in you, comment there. I'm on this journey too. The confrontation seemed to drag on in slow motion, even if every second was charged with overwhelming intensity. The man, surprised by Max's fierce reaction, writhed as if trying to escape from a live trap. His arm swung from side to side in desperate movements, but the dog's jaw remained set like iron. It was as if each escape attempt only fueled the animal's determination. The sound of barking reverberated through the street, ricocheting off the walls of houses and through open windows, tearing frightened glances from those who, until a few minutes earlier, lived an absolutely ordinary afternoon. There was no way to ignore it. Something extraordinary was happening there, something that broke the normality of everyday life and exposed the hidden truth behind a routine that had always seemed safe. The girl, a few steps behind, stood motionless, as if her feet were rooted to the ground. His sweaty hands gripped the backpack so tightly that his knuckles turned whitish, as if that simple object could function as a protective amulet. Deep down, though, she knew all her hope was focused on Max. The heart seemed about to leap from the chest. Each beat sounded like a drum in the ears. The watery eyes barely blinked, unable to deviate from the raw scenery that unfolded. A part of her wanted to run, to seek refuge, to disappear behind a gate. Another part stood there, frozen by the shock, trusting fully in the four-legged friend who now stood like a living wall. The man, realizing that brute force would not be enough to get rid of him, alternated between angry screams and rude attempts to pose as a victim. "Let go of that dog! I wasn't doing anything," he shouted. His voice choked between despair and fury, but his actions belied him. The gaze that minutes before had been fixed on the child now burned with hatred, as one who saw one's own plans crumble before an unexpected obstacle. The feet sought stability, but each false step only evidenced the imbalance. In 2 lunges, he tried to kick Max. In both, the dog set his teeth with even more conviction, turning pain into resistance, impulse into strategy. On the other side, the neighborhood began to gather, attracted by the noise. Faces appeared at the windows. Doors were hastily opened. Voices echoed, full of disbelief. Some put their hands to their mouths in shock. Others shouted confused words, trying to organize chaos as if they could command animal instinct from a distance. It was like watching a thriller in broad daylight, a thriller without a script, in which no one knew what the next frame would be. A boy ran inside to call the police. A lady entered the house looking for a rag and alcohol. A neighbor held up his cell phone, vacillating between filming and helping. But the collective gaze carried the same doubt. Would Max be able to maintain control until help arrived? A car slowed down when it noticed the commotion. The driver lowered the glass, glanced at everyone and stood still, as if his eyes were looking for a clue to what to do. An elderly gentleman cautiously descended the porch steps, cordless phone clenched to his ear, repeating the address to the attendant, his voice trembling, his words stumbling. In the background, a woman pressed her little son to her chest, who asked endlessly what was happening, and she answered only, "Stay here with me," as if holding the world with both hands. Max, in turn, did not give a millimeter. The firm paws scraped the ground, the body vibrated in tension. The gaze was a point of fire stuck in the invader. It looked bigger than it really was, inflated from the inside out for a purpose that asked for no explanation. The saliva foamed between the teeth, the breath came out hot, and yet there was method in the instinct. The position of the body protected the girl, and the angle of the bite prevented the man from pulling himself together. With each attempt to pry off the arm, Max adjusted the pressure as if calculating on an invisible map, where the aggressor's lever would be smaller. The man tried another tactic. He stepped back half a step, forcing his jacket back, his free hand groping in his pocket. The gesture sought something, an object, a shortcut, an advantage. The detail chilled the spine of those watching. A neighbor shouted for him to stop. Another approached a little, as if considering intervening, but retreated before the uncertainty of the next second. The risk multiplied. If the man took something out of his pocket, he could injure the dog. If someone threw himself on it, the girl could be exposed. The street breathed in sobs, reassembling improvised rules of survival. Now I want to go even deeper into this matter, because the tension here does not belong only to the visible scene. It inhabits the silence of every decision not made. In fractions of a second, entire revelations about who we are surface. The stranger, who believed he controlled the narrative, saw his plot plummet. The girl, torn from her comfort zone, touched the edge of a hidden truth about the fragility of the world. The neighbors, under an unexpected spotlight, discovered how difficult and at the same time inevitable it is to choose a side when danger knocks down the door. It is in these scenes that the real impact is measured, what each one decides to sustain even if it is tremendous. The girl, unable to scream, let out a sound that was half sob, half mute request. He called Max by name, softly, as if to remind him that he was there, as if his voice could lighten the weight of that instant. The legs trembled, the mouth dried up. The vision was blurred with tears. Still he took 2 steps back, obeying an instinct of self-preservation that Max seemed to understand and anticipate. The dog adjusted the body, opened the chest, placed itself more diagonally, creating an invisible corridor between the girl and the offender. And so it was, rearranging centimeters, that courage wrote a strategy. The man, pressed by resistance, changed the angle of attack. He made mention of turning left, pulling the body with brutality. Max responded with a dry stride that threw him off balance, eliciting a hoarse scream. The steel of the keychain fell on the asphalt, clinking. For a second, the world held its breath. The smell of rubber from tires, the dust raised by the dragging of shoes, the distant hum of an engine. Everything seemed to group together, as if the whole environment wanted to participate in the denouement. 2 more houses ahead, a young man appeared with a baseball bat, his face pale, his hands trembling, torn between the impulse to protect and the fear of making everything worse. He did not immediately return calls. He looked at his mother at the window, who shook her head in the negative, begging him not to get in, and stopped a few meters away, attentive, taking a deep breath, measuring each step. Across the street, a lady came up with a bucket of water, ready to throw if it was necessary to separate. Someone shouted that no, that water could confuse the dog. Another suggested covering the man with a jacket to reduce vision. Ideas flew like sparks on a windy day. The stranger, in a fit of despair, tried to hug Max's neck with his free arm, a maneuver that mixed violence and lack of control. The move was crude but miscalculated. Feeling the pressure, the dog changed the strategy. He released his sleeve for an instant to grab higher on the forearm. The precision was surgical. The man howled, and the sound, harsh, scratched the air like metal. Little dots of blood sprouted, inconspicuous at first, then more visible, dyeing the fabric. A chorus of "Calm down," it exploded. But calm is a fragile word when danger is dressed in people. Then came a micro-instant in which everything seemed to tip the wrong way. The attacker managed to partially rotate the trunk, dragging Max a few centimeters as if to lift the dog off the ground. The girl stepped forward in an involuntary reflex, and two neighbors held her by the shoulders, preventing her from approaching. The barks, which were a continuous stream, became intermittent, filled with low growls that vibrated in Max's chest like an engine. The suspense reached an invisible summit. The eyes searched at the same point in space for a sign that the worst would not happen. But the dog's strength didn't just come from muscle. It came from a deeper source: purpose. Max found traction with his hind legs and, in a coordinated movement, pulled the man's arm down, gluing it to his own body and reducing the attacker's lever. It was the intelligence of instinct on the scene, the quiet mathematics of the body in defense, the strategy you don't learn in textbooks. The stranger swore, spat, threatened, but the words dissolved in the air, having no power over the decision that was already made. The girl would not be touched. The neighborhood, once a mosaic of indecision, began to organize out of sheer necessity. Someone held the gate open for the girl to enter, in case it was possible to retreat. Another brought a towel, in case it bled. A teenage girl approached with a bottle of water and held it out to the girl, who moistened her lips without being able to drink it. A gentleman, who said he understood dogs, suggested that no one touch the animal, that they speak quietly, that they avoid sudden movements. And so, without official leadership, without rehearsal, those people were weaving a net, each thread a minimal decision, each decision a piece of protection. The man tried again with his knee, aiming at Max's flank. The hit was partial, but strong enough to start a different bark, short and sharp. A chorus of no it erupted around, as if the whole street was talking at once. Max retreated half a step without letting go, shifted the weight and resumed pressure. The gaze did not waver, there was fire and focus. The girl clutched her backpack to her chest and whispered, "Go, Max," as if the word could travel through the air and land, lightly, on the back of her friend's head. The electric mood made even distant noises gain meaning. A bell rang in the distance, a motorcycle slowed, a window slammed in the wind. Every sound felt like an omen. When the tension reaches this point, everything becomes a signal. The body reads the world as a coded text, and every detail is an instruction for survival. It was in this tangle of messages that Max kept his head cool, his feet planted, his bite firm. The attacker tried to recompose the narrative with shouts, "Get this animal out of me! He is dangerous! I will sue!" But people's eyes didn't buy the story. The choreography of the moment belied the words. It was not an out-of-control dog, it was a guardian on high alert, containing a threat that still sought breach. The girl, hearing the accusations, pressed her lips and shook her head in the negative, almost imperceptibly, as if telling herself that the truth did not need an audience to exist. A sound in the distance began to cut through the air, maybe a siren, maybe just a truck, maybe imagination fueled by the desire for help to arrive. The effect was immediate. Some neighbors straightened their posture, as if a silent command had been given. The prospect of outside intervention rearranged invisible pieces. The risk of an impulsive movement decreased 1 degree, and wakefulness gained strategic contours, keeping the child behind the human line, avoiding surrounding the aggressor too much, preserving the autonomy of the dog that, until then, was the only safe anchor. And yet the suspense did not subside. The next second remained an unknown. All it took was a miscalculated step for everything to fall apart. All it took was a stone in the wrong place for someone to slip. All it took was a reflex for the man to touch the child. Fear, when it spreads, is a thick fog. It clouds thought and shortens horizons. But there also grew another strength, slower but firmer: shared courage. It makes no noise. It goes about occupying empty spaces, straightening columns, reminding everyone that care is action, not speech. In this invisible field of forces, Max was the axis. His body, tense and precise, translated a mathematics of survival that is only learned by living. He foresaw the stranger's step as one who reads a sentence before hearing it. His decision was not loud, it was constant. There was no theatrical heroism, there was presence. A presence that holds the world in place until help arrives, until the light breaks through, until danger realizes it has nowhere to go. The girl took her first deep breath in many minutes, not knowing how to explain where that breath had come from. Maybe from the bark that wouldn't budge, perhaps from the hand of a neighbor resting on your shoulder, perhaps from a new certainty born there. Some presences hold us inside like roots. And it is on this razor's edge that the story continues, with the whole street holding the air, with the girl clinging to her own heart, with the stranger trying to fabricate a way out, and with Max supporting, alone, the weight of a destiny that could not in any way be allowed to chance. If this crossed you in any way, comment there. This makes sense to me. Max wouldn't let go. His jaw was set with a firmness that defied any attempt at liberation. The man had already tried everything, twisting his arm, turning his body, kicking it, pushing it with his other hand, but nothing worked. Every desperate move was met with even more pressure. It was as if the dog had activated a key within itself that transformed it into a pure protective instinct. Sweat dripped down the attacker's face, mixed with the blood that was beginning to stain the fabric of his sleeve, and despair now stamped every trace of his expression. On the other side, the girl watched, paralyzed, but with a growing certainty. Max would not let go. He wouldn't abandon her. The dog's persistence went beyond physical strength. There was a mindset behind every second that kept the stranger in check. It was as if loyalty had turned into inexhaustible energy, and the more the man struggled, the more Max showed that his decision was unshakable. What sustained the animal at that moment was not only the body trained by life next to the family, but a hidden truth. He did not know the meaning of the word give up. The neighbors, who were just shocked before, were beginning to notice this too. Murmurs ran through the makeshift crowd. He won't let go. Look at the strength of this dog. My God, he does not let man escape. It was as if everyone witnessed not just a defense scene, but a real-time lesson in courage. With each passing second, the impact of that persistence widened, showing that heroism is not measured in size but in purpose. The man, feeling the unshakable resistance, began to use his voice as a weapon. He shouted louder, trying to intimidate the dog, trying to manipulate the neighbors with phrases that sought to reverse the situation. "For this dog is crazy. Are you going to let him kill me? Get him off me." But the words sounded hollow in the face of what everyone saw. It wasn't an out-of-control animal. It was a guardian fulfilling its mission. It was impossible to deny the truth that lay before every watchful eye. The child was protected because Max would not let go. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic, because this persistence speaks not only about a specific moment, but about the essence of what dedication is. How many times in life do we give up when the pressure increases, when the resistance seems too great? Max shows us the opposite, that there are battles in which there is simply no option to retreat, in which the only decision is to resist to the end. And that's not just true for dogs in extreme situations, but for any journey where love and purpose are greater than fear. The man's body began to waver. The arm no longer had the same strength to react, and each attempted blow seemed weaker than the previous one. Meanwhile, Max remained constant, as if he had found an invisible source of energy. His heart beat fast, his body trembled in effort, but determination held him steady. This transformation of instinct into courage was the clearest revelation that persistence is not just insisting, but sustaining a purpose until the danger is really over. The girl, still clutching her backpack, took a few steps back, pushed by neighbors who tried to move her away from the immediate risk. And it was at that moment that the true extent of Max's persistence was realized. He did not let go of the man until he was sure that she was out of reach. His eyes, still fixed on the aggressor, followed the child's every movement, as if he would only relax when he was fully convinced that nothing would touch him. This detail did not go unnoticed. A neighbor commented aloud, "Look how he only stops when he sees the girl is safe." And that comment crossed the scene as a collective revelation. Max's heroism was not just physical, it was emotional, strategic, almost human in its logic. He knew, in a way that only animals seem to understand, that the fight was not over, while the danger was still alive. The stranger already showed signs of exhaustion, the reddened face, the abundant sweat, the faintest cries. Max, on the other hand, remained merciless in his persistence. There was no hesitation. There was no break. It was absolute dedication. This contrast showed something powerful. When motivation is born of selfishness, it is exhausted. But when it is born of love, it is renewed. This is the difference that turns a conflict scene into a life lesson. The suspense continued because no one knew exactly when or how the confrontation would end. But there was one certainty that became clear by the second. Max would not let go until the girl's safety was completely guaranteed. And this realization, while frightening, also brought a quiet peace to all who watched. The hero was there, persisting, devoting every ounce of energy, every muscle, every heartbeat. And if this scene made you reflect on courage and persistence, write there in the comments, "I'm on this journey too." The noise from the street had already turned into a chaotic symphony of screams, barking, and hurried footsteps. People looked from all corners, but no one had yet managed to act firmly. It was then that among the frightened faces appeared well-known figures. The girl's parents, who came running, alerted by neighbors. Despair was stamped on their faces, as if every step was too heavy in the face of the unfolding scene. The mother screamed her daughter's name in a panicked tone, her voice choked with fear that it was too late. The father, in silence, with clenched fists, faced the stranger, as if he already knew that reality had exceeded the limits of any normality. The girl, seeing her parents, wanted to run towards them, but Max remained motionless, blocking any attempt to approach the man. The dog seemed to expand its presence, as if silently saying, "Only after I am sure that everything is under control." The father took a few steps, but stopped when he realized that the tension was not over yet. The attacker was still struggling, albeit with less force, trying to tear his arm from the dog's jaw. Blood stained his sleeve, his breathing was short and irregular, but his malice had not completely disappeared. Neighbors shouted instructions all at the same time. "Hold the child! Call the police! Don't touch the dog!" The scene was a mixture of chaos and improvised order, as if each was trying to contribute a piece of the puzzle. And then, in the background, the sound everyone expected began to echo. The siren of a car, crossing the air with the force of a warning. The noise grew, mixing with Max's barking, and in a few seconds, the presence of authority imposed itself on that scene. The car stopped abruptly, and two police officers quickly descended, assessing the situation in fractions of a second. One of them raised his hands in a sign of calm, trying to approach slowly, while the other was already talking on the radio, asking for medical reinforcement. But Max wasn't relaxing. Even with the uniforms, even with the steady voice of the agents, he knew that the danger had not been completely neutralized. His body remained tense, his teeth still set, his gaze fixed on the enemy. It was as if to say, "I only let go when there is no doubt that she is safe. Now I want to go even deeper into this matter," because the arrival of the adults and the authorities was not only a physical reinforcement, it was also a psychological milestone. The girl, who until then had been in a state of shock, felt a weight come off her shoulders at the sight of her parents and police officers at the same time. It was as if the world had finally realigned itself, as if the fine line between danger and safety was little by little being tightened. But this transition was not immediate. The moment required persistence, because the tension had not yet dissipated. The father approached once again, calling the dog's name, trying to calm him down. But Max did not divert the man's attention. His mentality was clear. The priority was not to obey external commands, but to keep the child untouchable. This posture impressed even the police officers, who exchanged quick glances with each other, recognizing that they were not in front of an ordinary dog. There was a heightened instinct there, something beyond simple animal behavior. The aggressor, already out of strength, fell to his knees but still muttered threats. And it was at this point that the police acted firmly, moving forward to contain him. One of them pulled handcuffs, while the other held the man by the shoulder and free arm. Max only loosened his bite when he realized that the enemy was completely overpowered. Even so, he remained by the girl's side, panting, attentive, as if he was still prepared to act if necessary. This detail is revealing. The dog was not fooled by the simple gesture of the handcuffs, was not distracted by the presence of uniforms or the crowd that now breathed a sigh of relief. He continued in the role of guardian until every fiber of the environment was free of threat. This persistence until the last second shows a mindset that is not driven by vanity, but by purpose. He did not want recognition, did not expect applause. What mattered was only the safety of the child. The mother, in tears, rushed to her daughter, hugging her with a strength that mixed relief and fear. The girl clung to it, but without letting go of Max, keeping one hand resting on the brown fur. as if silently recognizing the greatness of that gesture. The father, still in shock, thanked the police officers, but his eyes were fixed on the dog as if trying to understand where such courage came from. The neighbors, who had previously been paralyzed, now all spoke at the same time. They commented on the scene, on the strength of the dog, on how the situation could have ended tragically. Some were still shaking, others were already filming the car taking the attacker, and there were even those who cried with relief. But at the center of it all was Max, panting, his body alert, looking around as if he didn't want to let his guard down. This moment was a real revelation about the essence of loyalty. It showed that courage is not only to act when no one expects it, but to hold the position to the end, even when others already believe that the danger has passed. This is what differentiates momentary heroism from absolute dedication. Max only relaxed when he felt the girl's hand slide down his neck and heard her sweet voice whispering his name. It was as if that simple word was confirmation that the mission had been accomplished. And if this passage brought you a sense of the impact that loyalty can have, comment there. This makes sense to me. The police had already taken the man away in handcuffs, and the street, once filled with tension and screams, was beginning to breathe again. But what really marked that moment was not the silence that slowly reoccupied the space, but the reunion of the family. The mother, still with tears in her eyes, could not let go of her daughter from her embrace. His arms wrapped around the girl as if they wanted to protect her from the whole world, as if in that gesture he could seal a silent promise to never let her go through something so threatening again. The father, who was trying to maintain a firm posture, let out his emotion when he knelt down in front of the two and ran his hand over his daughter's face, checking every detail, as if he needed confirmation that she was really there, whole, without a scratch. The girl, in turn, remained attached to both her mother and Max. Her small hand did not let go of the dog's fur, and the queasy look made it clear that although the panic was still present, a different feeling was already born inside her, the relief of being alive, and the gratitude that she was not alone at that moment. The hug she gave Max wasn't just physical. It was as if she had found in him the concrete representation of all that trust meant. No matter what happened, he would be there. This was the hidden truth that moment revealed. The neighbors, now closer, looked at the scene in shock. Some whispered about how the dog had coped with everything alone. Others limited themselves to sighing, touched by the intensity of that reunion. It was impossible not to realize that there was something greater than a simple episode of danger. It was a moment of transformation, a milestone that would be engraved in everyone's memory as living proof that courage can be born in the most unexpected places. The father, still kneeling, held Max by the muzzle carefully, looking him straight in the eyes. There were not enough words to express what I felt, but in that silence there was respect, recognition, and a deep admiration. It was like saying, without speaking, "You saved my daughter's life, and that's something I can never repay." Max, still panting, accepted the gesture, remaining close to the child without losing his guardian posture. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject, because what we are seeing here is not just the natural reaction of a family after the danger has passed. It is also a portrait of the backstage of life, of those moments when all that matters is the presence, the bond, the certainty that we are not alone in our journey. Often in the rush of everyday life, we forget to value the simple fact that we have someone, human or animal, willing to stay by our side when everything seems to fall apart. And it is precisely in these moments of impact that we perceive how the mentality changes. Pain gives way to learning, fear turns into decision, and uncertainty generates revelations that we carry forever. The girl, who minutes before had experienced the terror of being torn from her innocence, now discovered the depth of a love that goes beyond words. She looked at Max with different eyes, as if she had aged years in a matter of minutes. Childhood, in a way, would never be the same again, because now she knew the vulnerability of the world, but at the same time she had seen the strength of a bond that nothing could break. This awareness, however precocious, would become an essential part of her journey. The mother, while holding her daughter tightly, quietly repeated consoling phrases, as if trying to calm both the child and herself. She knew that that scene would change not only the girl's life, but also the way everyone in the family would see Max. From a housemate, he had turned into a hero. From a pet, it had become a symbol of hope and courage. It was a metamorphosis that did not come from titles or recognitions, but from the pure truth of what he had done. This kind of revelation is rare, and when it happens, it alters the mindset of everyone involved. The father, who once perhaps saw the dog as just part of the routine of the house, now saw it as part of the very structure that supported the family. The girl, who once loved Max as a friend, now revered him as a protector, and even the neighbors who watched everything as witnesses would not leave there the same. Each would carry with them the reminder that loyalty is not just a word, but a transformative force. And perhaps this is precisely what touches us the most, to realize that in moments of greatest fragility, life offers us clear signs of who really matters. Sometimes it is in vulnerability that we discover strength. Sometimes it is in chaos that we find clarity. This scene of the family embracing with Max between them is not only about survival, but about profound revelations about the essence of relationships. Now, as the atmosphere began to calm down, something still hung in the air. It was no longer fear, but a different, almost sacred energy, as if everyone had participated in a kind of rite of passage. The girl, the parents, the dog, even the neighbors who looked closely, all had crossed an invisible boundary and left transformed. The impact was not only in the danger averted, but in what was revealed, the certainty that true love, when put to the test, manifests itself in its purest and most courageous form. And if this part of the story resonated with you in any way, write there in the comments, "I'm on this journey too." The hours following the event were like waves that spread after a stone is thrown into the water. The impact was not restricted to the street where it all happened, or just that family. Soon the news won the corridors of the neighborhood, went through the doors of bakeries, echoed in the hurried conversations of the fair, became the agenda in the casual meetings of neighbors who, even without having seen the scene up close, already repeated with emotion every detail that had been told to them. Max was no longer just the dog of a family and became the hero of an entire community. And it was impossible not to notice how this transformation took place before everyone's eyes. Local newspapers were quick to appear. The press car parked around the corner at the end of that afternoon, and the microphones, always looking for stories of impact, turned to that scenario so human and at the same time so extraordinary. Reporters were talking to mom, dad, neighbors who witnessed the confrontation, and every word came loaded with emotion because no one could count without letting out the intensity that still pulsed in the air. With each account, the image of Max became even greater. It was no longer just the dog that barked and bit. It was the guardian who kept an innocent life out of the hands of danger. Animal behavior experts also spoke out. Some, interviewed by the media, said that this type of attitude was not common in any dog, but the result of a rare combination of instinct, bond, and mentality. They explained that Max not only reacted to a threatening stimulus, but sustained the reaction until the situation was under control. For them, this detail made all the difference. Persistence, clarity of purpose, the courage to face an adult without measuring consequences. That is why experts repeated in unison, Max's action not only helped, she effectively saved the child's life. This recognition further broadened the perception of all involved. Suddenly, neighbors who might never have stopped to look at Max closely now viewed him with an almost solemn respect. Children commented at school that they wanted a dog just like Max, as if he had become a flesh and blood character, a real hero in the midst of everyday life. And even people from afar, who followed on television or social networks, were moved to realize that in a world so marked by stories of violence and fear, there was room for narratives of courage and loyalty that rekindled faith in the unexpected. The family, still gripped by emotions difficult to translate, lived a mixture of gratitude and surprise. The mother confessed to reporters that, even after hours, she still felt her body tremble whenever she remembered the instant she believed she would lose her daughter. The father, more restrained, said that what impacted him the most was knowing that Max did not hesitate. For him, the dog's action was also a life lesson. In critical moments, there is no time for doubts, only for decisions. And this phrase echoed as a reminder to everyone who listened. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because what we see here is not just the construction of a narrative of heroism, but a revelation about how our collective perceptions work. When an expert says Max saved a child's life, it's not just about technique or animal behavior. It's also about authority, about the way we need to hear someone on the outside validate what we already feel on the inside. This dynamic reveals a lot about how we are shaped by social mindset, how our emotional decisions gain more traction when confirmation comes from who we consider to be a voice of truth. And there is yet another point. The impact of public recognition falls not only on the dog or on the family, but on everyone who allows himself to reflect. Max's story becomes a mirror of our own journey, a reminder that courage, loyalty, and protective instinct are virtues that are often hidden behind the scenes until life puts us on an unexpected stage. The dog, without seeking fame, without wanting applause, ended up being catapulted into a position of symbol, precisely because it did what so many of us in critical situations would like to be able to do: act without hesitation, guided only by the hidden truth of what matters. While the experts gave interviews and the neighbors told emotional versions, the girl remained clinging to Max, as if the opinion of the world was only a background. For her, it didn't matter the headline or the interview. What mattered was the intimate certainty that she had been protected. This contrast is powerful because it shows how external recognition can amplify a story, but the true transformation happens in the heart of those who have lived the experience. And this revelation hits home. In the end, the applause is fleeting, but the bond is eternal. The presence of the media, however intense, also carried a side effect, exposing something so intimate to everyone's gaze. But in this case, exposure did not bring wear, it brought unity. People who had never talked before approached, sharing reflections on how we need to learn from animals, on how, on many occasions, they are the ones who teach us the deepest lessons. This has created a sense of community that may not have existed before. The neighborhood, once just a set of neighboring houses, now perceived itself as part of the same history, witnesses of the same impact. This moment opens space for further reflection on the human journey. How often do we wait for external recognition to validate our own courage? How often do we fail to act because we think first of the judgment of others? Max thought nothing of it. He did not seek applause, headlines, or pundits. He was only true to his purpose, to protect. And that's the kind of decision that turns an instant into eternity. The most curious thing is to realize how this narrative of animal heroism works as a metaphor for our own choices. We all at some point in life face our own dangerous strangers, situations that threaten what we hold most valuable. And in these moments, what defines our future is not the recognition that will come later, but the courage to act in the present. What experts say afterwards can even reinforce, but the real impact happens at the time the decision is made. So when the local media made headlines, when neighbors praised Max, and when experts confirmed that his action was decisive, we were not only facing a collective recognition, but a profound revelation about how life demands the same readiness from us. The hero is not the one who expects to be applauded, but the one who does not hesitate in the face of threat. And if this thought made sense to you, comment there. This makes sense to me. When the dust of that scene began to settle and the emotions, little by little, were finding space to reorganize within each person who witnessed the moment, it became impossible not to reflect on what had really happened there. It was not just a fight of a dog against a man who posed danger, nor even just the immediate rescue of an innocent child. What they all witnessed was the pure materialization of something we often overlook in the run of life: the unbreakable loyalty and instinctive courage that a dog carries within itself. It is as if in a matter of seconds, a desperate situation has been transfigured into a heroic rescue, reminding everyone that the line between tragedy and salvation can lie in the decision of a single being. And this invites us to delve even deeper into the meaning of this experience. Think about how life in many ways unfolds unexpectedly. There are times when we are tested so suddenly that there is no time to devise elaborate strategies or calculate risks. It is in these moments, when everything seems to escape our control, that the true essence comes to the fore. Max, that day, did not plan anything. He did not analyze statistics, did not make probability calculations. He simply responded to the invisible call that exists between love and protection, as if his entire journey up to that moment had been just a rehearsal for that scene. And that's why her attitude wasn't just physical, it was a revelation of mindset, a living testimony to how the right decision can transform an entire destiny in seconds. Now I want to go even deeper into this topic, because when we look beyond the surface, we realize that the real transformation happened not only to the girl, not only to her family, but to everyone who had contact with this story. There was a collective impact, a quiet awakening of consciousness. Suddenly, every person who heard of Max began to remember their own bonds, the invisible bonds that sustain life. And this leads us to a hidden truth. Four-legged heroes exist everywhere, but they reveal their greatness only when life puts to the test what seemed ordinary. This kind of event exposes something fascinating about the human journey. We, with all our rationality, often hesitate, ponder too much, get stuck behind the scenes of doubts. Meanwhile, the animals, guided by instinct, show an almost disconcerting clarity. They simply act. This difference challenges us to rethink our own way of dealing with situations. How often do we let fear of failure or worry about external judgment keep us from acting? And how many times, if we had the courage to move with the same determination as Max, could we turn a crisis into a turning point? The emotional impact of this episode goes beyond the heat of the moment. He leaves subtle but deep marks. The girl, for example, will forever carry the memory not only of being saved, but of having vividly witnessed the power of loyalty. This memory will become a compass in your life, a constant reminder that even on the darkest days there are invisible forces, sometimes in the form of four-legged companions that rise up to protect you. And we, who observe from the outside, are also invited to reflect on our own Max. Who in our lives has risen with unexpected courage to protect or support us in the most critical moments? And more, have we also been able to take on this role when necessary? The message that springs from this episode is powerful because it goes straight to the heart. Loyalty and courage are not abstract concepts. They are living forces that can redesign an entire reality in a matter of seconds. And this makes us realize that deep down, we all carry within us the possibility of acting with this same clarity. The dog just shows us, in a more visible way, what it means to be willing to give everything for what matters. This story also reveals how our decisions shape not only our paths, but the paths of everyone around. A gesture of courage can echo in many lives, crossing barriers and creating inspirations that we cannot always measure immediately. It's as if Max has unknowingly become part of a transformation network, touching not only the girl, but everyone who has heard of him. This is the magic of genuine acts. They are not restricted to the instant. They spread like seeds, germinating in lands we could never imagine. And what makes all this even more fascinating is the contrast between simplicity and depth. Max was not aware that he would be called a hero, did not understand headlines, did not seek recognition. His act was born out of something that seemed small, almost automatic: to protect. But it was exactly this simplicity that generated the gigantic impact. Because in the end, the greatest transformations do not arise from grandiose plans, but from pure and direct decisions in the face of what life puts us through. If we look behind the scenes of our own journey, we will realize that we have also experienced moments like this, when a simple choice completely changed the course of a situation. And this is where the reflection deepens. Are we attentive to notice when these moments arrive? Do we recognize that heroism often manifests itself quietly, discreetly, without a spotlight, but with a lasting impact? Max reminds us that courage and loyalty don't need a stage, only an opportunity. And when they arise, they have the power to reveal the hidden truth about who we are and what we truly value. This kind of revelation not only thrills, but transforms, because it calls us to look within and realize how much we are capable of doing more, of protecting more, of loving more, even when everything seems to be against us. And if that message resonated with you, if it somehow awakened memories or insights about your own journey, right there, I'm on this journey too. When we reach the end of this journey of tension, emotion, and revelations, it is impossible not to feel a lump in your throat when thinking about everything that happened. The scene that began with fear and uncertainty turned into a living proof of courage, loyalty, and protective instinct that only a real four-legged hero could demonstrate. Max not only faced danger head-on, but showed that the decision to protect, even in the face of risk, can be the factor that separates tragedy from salvation. It is as if, in that instant, he had reminded us of something essential. Courage does not need elaborate planning. It is born the moment we choose not to retreat. And the impact of this gesture goes beyond immediate rescue. It leaves lessons that linger, reverberate, and shape mindsets. The girl who was saved will never see the world the same way again. Her family will forever carry the certainty that a bond of true love can, yes, change destinies. And we, as observers of this history, are invited to reflect on our own choices, on the times when life demands that we rise without hesitation. This is the hidden truth that we often miss. Everyday courage, silent and real, is what turns a situation of danger into a milestone of learning and transformation. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject, because deep down, Max's heroism is also a mirror for our own journeys. How often do we find ourselves faced with situations in which there was no time to think, only to act? How many times have we been called upon to decide between protecting or retreating, between facing or pretending that we have not seen? It is in these moments that we discover who we really are. And, however contradictory it may seem, it is often precisely in instinct that our greatest wisdom dwells. The dog acts without calculations, but his decision carries an impact. We humans, with all our rationality, often get lost behind the scenes of doubts and forget that in many cases transformation only happens when we launch ourselves without reservations. This story also shows how individual decisions can echo in many lives. Max's act was not restricted to that street, that family, that afternoon. It spread, became news, inspired neighbors, thrilled strangers. And this happens because there is an invisible force that connects gestures of courage to the human heart. When someone, or in this case a dog, reveals its protective essence, it awakens in all of us a reminder that we also have this capacity in store. The impact is collective and the message is clear. We don't need covers or spotlights to be heroes. We just need the decision not to let fear be greater than our loyalty. And perhaps the most beautiful thing about this journey is to realize that true heroism is not born of a desire for recognition, but of genuine surrender. Max did not seek applause, did not expect to be remembered in headlines or tributes. He only acted because his mentality was already shaped by an unbreakable bond. That simplicity is what makes it all the more grandiose. Because in a world full of masks, backstage and appearances, it is precisely in the hidden truth of instinct that we find the purest revelations. And here is the reflection. How many times has life put before us situations in which a courageous attitude could change everything? How many times have we hesitated while the chance to make a difference slipped away? Perhaps the greatest lesson of this story is exactly this. Do not wait for the perfect moment, but recognize that often it is the courage in improvisation that saves, protects, and transforms. In the end, what this dog taught us is something that echoes far beyond a quiet street and an afternoon interrupted by chaos. He showed us that courage and the instinct of protection can save lives at critical moments. It reminded us that heroism is not a distant fantasy, but something that can arise from where we least expect it, even from the heart of a four-legged friend. And if this story moved you, leave your like, share it with someone who loves dogs, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing stories of animal heroism. And if you've made it this far, I think you've realized how much stories like this can really touch us and even change the way we look at the bonds we have with those who are next to us. So if this content made sense to you, enjoy and subscribe to the channel so you continue to follow each new story I bring here. And tell me in the comments that you stayed until the end writing. I'm with you until the end. I will love to know who really walked along with me to the last detail of this journey. Oh, and also leave your like, because it shows that this connection we create here makes a difference. And since we are in this exchange, there is a video here on the side that complements this subject. Click and continue with me there, that our conversation still has a lot to yield.